et l'importance de coopérer davantage dans le domaine policier, dans le domaine judiciaire, d'échanger mieux les informations de manière plus systématique, de tenter de prévenir et de lutter contre le terrorisme. Nous avons aussi eu l'occasion, après un message communiqué notamment par le Premier ministre finlandais, de faire un point sur l'importance de continuer à agir pour la protection et la sécurité des infrastructures critiques. En termes de migration, nous avons eu un échange plutôt bref pour ce Conseil européen. C'est un sujet qui revient régulièrement et qui reviendra régulièrement. Il y a un point clé que je souhaite mettre en évidence. C'est déjà le cas au moment de la réunion de Grenade, mais on sent qu'il y a un consensus de plus en plus important autour de la table pour renforcer la coopération avec les pays tiers, y compris au travers d'accords les plus complets possibles qui envisagent les différents pistes de coopération avec les pays tiers sur ce sujet-là, mais sur d'autres sujets également. Et enfin, on a eu l'occasion aujourd'hui d'aborder plusieurs sujets qui touchent aux affaires extérieures de l'Union européenne. D'une part, la situation dans les Balkans occidentaux et plus particulièrement la normalisation entre la Serbie et le Kosovo. Nous réaffirmons notre détermination à soutenir la normalisation. Hier, 2 réunions importantes ont eu lieu, vous le savez, et le point que nous retenons de ces réunions, c'est l'engagement qui a été exprimé par les 2 leaders de mettre en œuvre, d'implémenter les accords qui sont sur la table, et nous demandons instamment que ces accords soient implémentés parce que nous sommes convaincus que c'est le chemin vers la normalisation. Nous avons eu également l'occasion d'un échange sur la situation dans le Caucase du Sud. Et là aussi, nous sommes déterminés à continuer à agir dans le cadre de la médiation de l'Union européenne pour favoriser, pour donner lieu à cette normalisation entre l'Azerbaïdjan et l'Arménie, fondée sur les principes de reconnaissance mutuelle, d'intégrité territoriale et de souveraineté. Nous avons eu un échange stratégique sur ce sujet. C'était important d'être bien coordonné. Il a pu constater une forte unité du Conseil européen sur ce sujet. Et puis vous verrez dans les conclusions que la question du Sahel faisait aussi l'objet de notre attention pour ce Conseil européen. Et enfin, j'en viens maintenant au point qui a été le premier point dans l'ordre chronologique de nos travaux ce matin, l'économie, la compétitivité et le sommet de la zone euro. Donc je remercie bien sûr Christine Lagarde, Pascal Deneuve qui ont participé à nos travaux. On a eu un échange stratégique sur la situation économique. Et il y a 4 points que je souhaitais mettre en évidence de manière plus particulière. Le premier point, on est tous absolument déterminés à travailler pour renforcer la compétitivité, pas seulement à court terme, mais également dans le long terme de l'Union européenne. Et on a bien identifié quels étaient les sujets clés pour protéger et pour améliorer la compétitivité et pour progresser sur ce sujet extrêmement important, que ce soit les sujets liés à certaines pénuries dans le marché du travail, c'est un point d'attention qui doit nous mobiliser, les sujets liés aussi à la régulation, l'importance de mettre en place des régulations qui veillent à ce qu'il n'y ait pas de frein au développement économique, mais au contraire que ces régulations soient des atouts pour notre compétitivité et pour notre capacité à renforcer la base économique. Deuxième point avec la compétitivité, et c'est lié, bien entendu, la question énergétique. Des progrès importants ont été réalisés depuis le début de la guerre de la Russie contre l'Ukraine. Cependant, et ça a été mis en évidence par plusieurs collègues, on voit bien que nous sommes encore aujourd'hui avec des prix de l'énergie jusqu'à 4 fois supérieurs par rapport à ce qui est la pratique pour nos concurrents. Ça a un impact pour nos entreprises, les petites, les moyennes et les grandes. L'emploi est évidemment un sujet extrêmement important que l'on a pu aborder. Et puis le 4e point que je souhaiterais mentionner, c'est l'importance de l'investissement. Investir avec une ambition d'investir davantage et d'investir plus rapidement. Quand on regarde les grandes régions du monde, on observe qu'il y a des régions où il y a des investissements massifs et rapides. On doit être très engagé sur ce sujet-là et c'est en lien évidemment avec d'autres politiques, y compris celles qui sont liées à la mobilisation de moyens dans le cadre européen et à la mobilisation de moyens dans le cadre national, par les gouvernements nationaux, et la capacité à stimuler l'investissement privé et la confiance de nos entreprises dans le projet politique, économique, social qui est porté au départ de l'Union européenne. Un dernier point pour féliciter la Grèce à la suite du progrès qui a été réalisé et qui est très visible au travers des agences de notation. Et ça montre bien que la zone euro est un espace qui est un espace de prospérité, qui est un espace de solidarité économique. Et ce pas en avant pour la Grèce est un point qui a fait l'objet de notre attention. Et nous avons été plusieurs à féliciter les autorités grecques pour ce résultat et ce succès. Voilà les quelques points que je souhaitais faire à l'issue de ce Conseil européen.
Thank you, President. Next, the President of the European Commission, Ursula Von der Leyen, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you very much. We had a very dense discussion this morning with a multitude of subjects, so I will choose a few and report on those. Indeed, we started the day with a very good discussion about Europe's economic competitiveness. And here I would report on 4 different strands. First, that it is so important to continue to build on our strength, and we have many strengths. In other words, we have to focus on the areas where we already have a competitive edge or where we could take the lead. And for this, our industrial and our energy policies are putting us on the right path. You're familiar with the elements, for example, the Net Zero Industry Act or the Critical Raw Materials Act, but also now the reform of the electricity market is important to drive the production of renewables up and thus the energy prices down. And I very much welcome the agreement that we have found this week in Council, so now we can proceed with that reform. And there is the platform that we called STEP, for strategic investments, part of our proposed revised EU budget. STEP is the fund that we want to create to step up investments in emerging and strategic technologies. And I hope that all these proposals will be adopted soon so that we can kind of start our economic future right now. My second point is different. It's of course, as technologies are important, as important are the people to work with these technologies. And this is something we have also discussed on Wednesday afternoon with the tripartite summit. What we need to do is, because it's developing more and more into a bottleneck for our economy, is to look at the labor market and the lack of skilled labor or even labor. So the shortages have to be addressed, and we discussed that we have to tap into the existing potential and improve the situation. We have a record low unemployment rate of 6%, but if you look in the different elements of the labor market, we see that we have a much higher youth unemployment, so first task to address. Then we see that the female participation is way lower, than 12 percentage points lower than the male participation in the workforce. So here we have to engage in the important topic of creating the infrastructure to reconcile work and family, like kindergarten and good schools, but also, of course, have reconciliation of work and family in the companies. The third element, where there's a lot of untapped potential, are the older workers. And the fourth we discussed is legal migration. We had last year 3.7 million legal migrants coming to our labor market, and this is very good, and we need more of this. The discussion we have in migration is on the 300 or 400,000 irregular migrants, and I will report later on this one. But the legal migration is important for our country, and we will need more of this. Finally, my third point for the topic of competitiveness. Of course, we have to do our homework in the European Union itself, but we also have to make sure that we have a level playing field globally for our companies. And we have, in this context, discussed the Inflation Reduction Act again. The immediate macroeconomic impact at the moment is minor, but if you look at the sectorial implications, they are measurable. So we need to stay very vigilant, especially when we come now into the phase where we do have for the European Green Deal the whole legislative framework in place, but now it goes into implementation. And the path to implementation is via guidelines. We have to shape the guidelines now. And to make sure that the clean tech industries have a competitive advantage in the European Union, it is important that we listen now to them, what is for them crucial when we implement the legislation. These are the so-called clean tech dialogues that we have with our industry. So we go sector by sector by sector to identify where we can support our industry. This big work and more about it should not distract us from the much greater impact of unfair practices that we see by China, also a part of the discussion. And I want to conclude with the fact that, yes, we need a strong economic base to build our future competitiveness. It's a challenge. But what we also need are fiscal rules that can match that challenge, because sound public finances open the space for more investment. And we should press ahead with the adoption now of our proposed new rules for the European economic governance. Here, I welcome that the Spanish presidency is working intensively and tirelessly on this matter. Indeed, at the end of this discussion, we took the opportunity to congratulate Greece for the extraordinary progress it has made over the past years. Regaining investment grade is a significant milestone, and we pay tribute to the Greek people who have made enormous sacrifices, but have every reason to feel good. They have been incredibly resilient. Still a lot remains to be done, but I'm confident that Greece will continue on the path of sustainable and inclusive growth. Now, let me turn to Ukraine. It was very clear in the debate. Despite the geopolitical tensions in the Middle East, our focus continues to be on supporting Ukraine. And this is why I very much welcome that you invited yesterday President Zelensky to speak to us via VTC. We will continue delivering the much-needed weapons and ammunition. We will continue providing the much-needed financial relief. Just to a figure, altogether, if you look at Team Europe, we have provided almost 83 billion euros of assistance to Ukraine. Now, looking forward, the next step is the adoption of the 50 billion euro Ukraine facility, because Ukraine needs reliable and predictable financial support. Of course, we will continue also to support Ukraine as it walks the path leading to accession. We will provide our assessment, as you know, on such progress at the beginning of November. A final word on sanctions. We are in the process of preparing the 12th package of sanctions. Now we are in the consultations with the member states. In particular, we are looking into how to cut the remaining revenues Russia draws from the export of diamonds to Europe and its partners. This would be done in very close cooperation with our G7 partners, and we continue to make sure that our existing sanctions are properly implemented and effectively enforced. A last point on the immobilized assets of Russia in the European Union. This was also a point of discussion. We all recall that it was in March last year that we took collectively the important political decision to immobilize Russian sovereign assets. The value of these sovereign assets stands at 211 billion euro. And politically, we agreed that ultimately Russia must pay for the long-term reconstruction of Ukraine. We had a recent discussion of finance ministers in Marrakesh that allowed good progress on the basic principles. So the next step would be then an actual proposal. We are currently working on a proposal to initially focus on the so-called windfall profits. In other words, we will present a proposal to find a way how to use the proceeds from those assets that are currently benefiting a limited number of financial institutions in the European Union. These windfall profits are already quite substantial, and the idea is to pool them and then to channel them through the EU budget en bloc to Ukraine and the reconstruction of Ukraine. On migration, there was a strong support for the letter I sent to the leaders, and I will not reflect on the details of the letters, but the main messages. The main message is that we're making good progress on the two-track approach. You know, on the one hand, it's the legislative track. Here, the discussions on the different pieces of legislation under the Migration and Asylum Pact are advancing well. I would like to thank the Council and the Parliament for this and for all their efforts. And now we must keep up the momentum because we have to adopt this pact. The other track is the operational work. We are making good progress on the implementation of the 15 priority actions that we discussed in January. We have taken action to address the immediate situation along the different migratory routes that we have. And we have worked on advancing our cooperation with partner countries. And this is the principle also in moving forward now. So we will focus, first of all, on preventing irregular departures. For this, we have to increase the capacity of the neighboring countries for border surveillance and search and rescue. Then we need more outreach to countries of origin and transit. For this purpose, we need to build much more comprehensive and mutual beneficial partnership agreements, as we have discussed, for example, yesterday with Egypt. Then there is the important topic that we have to crack down on the smugglers and traffickers. In this context, we will present legislative proposals to fight smugglers and traffickers by the end of November. The legislation that we have in place is 20 years old, so it's high time to update it. And we will reinforce our cooperation with the UN agency, mostly UNODC. On top, we will soon host an international conference to launch a global alliance with a call to action against smugglers. To whomever you speak, whether it's country of origin or country of transit or a country where the debate of migration is intense, all understand and want to crack down on the cynical business of smugglers and traffickers. This is organized crime, and we have to fight it like we fight organized crime. Finally, on returns, as you know, the return rate this year so far has been 22%. Of those who have a return decision, this amount has to increase. Therefore, we offer to member states much more closer cooperation as Team Europe to speed up the procedures, to ensure the mutual recognition of return decisions. You have the decision in one member state, it's valid for all 27 member states, and most importantly, to organize joint return operations. Now, the better we are in the part that I mentioned at the very beginning, the legal migration, the legal pathways, the investment in education, the more we can be strict in the part of irregular migration. And this was finally the conclusion also of the debate on migration, and I will stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, President. We will open the floor to questions. So we start with the lady in white. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Lyubov Pronina, Bloomberg News. I have a question for Madam President. The Commission requested additional funds from member states, but is there also understanding where the cuts will come from? Has the Commission maybe a clear list, a clear understanding? And if so, why wasn't it shared by member states ahead of this meeting? Thank you very much.
Yeah, the process is as follows. There is the initial proposal of the Commission. This has been done months ago. Then the proposal goes into, let's say, the working structures. And here the Spanish presidency has done a great job in producing now 3 different negotiation boxes. These negotiation boxes comprise the different views of the different 27 member states. So you see a maturing process in these negotiation boxes. It was and is important that in between there is a tour de table to have the leaders' views in general, the political view. So yesterday the debate was not on fact figures, but it was on the general political view. And here you see, of course, that there are different views on, not on the priorities, they were broadly accepted, so that it is important to support Ukraine, that we need to do more on migration, that natural disasters and humanitarian aid has to be funded, and that we have to work on our competitiveness, that is step. So the priorities are broadly accepted. There are certainly the one or the other still added by member states, like defense. But the question is now, where do you get the resources? And here it's either national contributions or it is so-called redeployment from the EU budget. Of course, you will, of course, guess that there are different opinions on how to mobilize the necessary funding. There was some discussion also on new own resources. These are important, but till they are in place, it will take a certain while, 2 or 3 years, depends on when the legislation is ready. We have already proposals on the table for new own resources, like from the emission trading system or the carbon border adjustment mechanism. So for the mid and long term, these are good and necessary. But for the short term, we have the two instruments, national contributions or redeployment.
Thank you, President. We'll start there in the room on the right side.
Thank you very much. Aida Hajimosic from Al Jazeera Balkans. I have a question for the President of the Council. I'm just wondering how optimistic you are after yesterday's meetings with Vučić and Kurti. Bearing in mind that both leaders basically did not agree on the European proposals about the association of Serb municipalities, and what are the details of these proposal, because we haven't heard any details from the both leaders from the Balkans. Thank you.
No, thank you. I would like to repeat that we had two very important meetings, because we were together on the EU side with Josep Borrell, Chancellor Scholz, Emmanuel Macron, and President Meloni, and we passed a very clear message to both leaders in the region, and we explained what we expect from them, and what we expect from them is to implement the agreements, the various agreements, and indeed what you have mentioned, this topic of the Serbian municipalities, the association of Serbian municipalities, is one of the important elements, not the only one, but this is one of the important elements that must be implemented in our opinion. Point one. Point two, this is true, and I'm certain you are perfectly informed, that there is a debate on the signature of those agreements, because of the fact that Serbia does not recognize Kosovo at the time, being based on the constitution of Serbia, or at least the interpretation of the constitution of Serbia by the Serbian authorities. But the most important element, and this was a point made by various leaders today in the European Council meeting, the most important element is the fact that both leaders, in presence of the European representatives, they made very clear that they intend to implement those agreements. And I think that the days to come, the weeks to come, will be extremely important to check if indeed those agreements are implemented. And it will be the responsibility on the EU side to assess what are the consequences. What are the consequences if this is implemented, and what are the consequences if it is not implemented.
Thank you. We go with the FN, no?
Hello.
Not Euronews. Yes.
Hello, Jorge Liboreiro, Euronews. I have a question for both of you, but maybe particularly for you, Madam President, because you speak regularly about having agreements with third countries in order to control migration. The agreement that you have right now with Tunisia is in a relatively bad shape, because earlier this month, Tunisia sent you back 60 million that you had disbursed in budget support. President Kais Saied called the money, and I quote, charity. What do you think about this Tunisian refund? How do you feel about it? Can you still trust this country as a strategic partner, as you once called it? And then looking forward, how confident are you that you can sign more memorandum of understanding with countries that are probably going to be ruled by an authoritarian regime? Thank you.
The comprehensive partnership we are striving for, and we are agreeing with different countries, third countries, is specifically wider in the concept. So it's not only focusing on migration, but it is focusing on investment. For example, in infrastructure for renewable energy, because typically these countries have vast natural resources like wind and sun and space, but are lacking the infrastructure to produce renewable energy not only for export, but also for their own people. It includes investments in education with the purpose also, be it either schools or dual vocational training or connecting universities with our universities, the Mediterranean universities, for example, with the expectations that we establish a system, what I just also mentioned, where we put much more emphasis on the regular legal migration, talent partnerships. So this benefits the country itself, and of course it benefits also us in this partnership. What we also discuss are partially, and it's not in every country the same mixture, financial support. I put very much emphasis on the investment part. I think this is the most crucial one because it's the most sustainable. In this context, we also agree to address the organized crime around smuggling and trafficking. And there too, it is important that we join forces to fight this organized crime. We've seen that from Tunisia, after the time where we saw the high numbers of arrival to Lampedusa, the figures have gone down. So we see first positive effects. More important are the investments in, as I said, the infrastructure or the educational system. We are working on a similar blueprint with Egypt. Egypt is very open to establish such a comprehensive partnership, but there are also other examples. For example, our cooperation with Bangladesh, which is bearing fruit already, in the sense that there is systematic return of those who come irregularly, but we have established a talent partnership and legal migration in a transparent and open way.
Thank you, President. Lisa, and then we'll take another question and we'll wrap it up. Yep.
Do I have to press anything? It's working, yeah?
Yeah, it does.
Just a very quick question for Madam President. Could you tell us what kind of conversation you had with Viktor Orban? Thank you.
Me? I did not have a bilateral today with Viktor Orban. So he was in the council. But there were all the 27 leaders, and yes, among them, me too, but not a special conversation with Viktor Orban. Or are you referring to a specific event?
What was said about his meeting with Putin?
So let's say the approach of the leaders was, in general, a leader is sovereign and free to choose his or her discussion partners. But what we need is close coordination. And what we need is transparency if the content of the discussion affects the European Union and the unity in the European Union. That was the general message that was sent.
Thank you. And the last question we'll take, yeah.
Nourdin Fridi from l'Arabia News Channel. J'ai une question sur la guerre au Gaza, malheureusement, parce qu'entre la conférence de presse d'hier soir et aujourd'hui, le massacre continue, Monsieur le Président, Madame la Présidente. Depuis le samedi, le sommet du Caire, les pays qui sont souvent identifiés comme les partenaires de l'Union européenne, savoir l'Égypte, la Jordanie, l'Arabie saoudite, l'autorité palestinienne, ne cessent de le dire, que ce soit au Caire, aux Nations Unies, et j'imagine dans les conversations, d'appeler pour un cessez-le-feu. Et malheureusement, le communiqué ne le fait pas, ne le mentionne pas, ne donne pas de perspective pour. Il m'est très difficile de ne pas dire que, même indirectement, l'Union européenne couvre le massacre qui est en cours aujourd'hui. Pourquoi l'Union européenne ne prête pas l'oreille à ses partenaires arabes qui connaissent mieux Gaza que quiconque. Je vous remercie.
Nous avons exprimé une position unie, très claire et très ferme. Il est important de ne pas donner une interprétation erronée à la position très claire et très ferme qui a été adoptée hier et qui du reste a été adoptée rapidement, après quelques heures de débat et sur base d'un texte qui avait été préparé et qui a pratiquement été accepté tel quel sous réserve d'un ajout qui est l'idée d'une conférence internationale pour s'engager sur un processus de paix. Mais quel est le message? Le message que nous voulons et nous appelons à la mise en place de corridors humanitaires et de pauses humanitaires. Et pour être très clair, ça veut dire que nous considérons qu'il est extrêmement urgent, important, essentiel de permettre que l'aide humanitaire puisse arriver à ses destinataires. Les leaders ont été très mobilisés sur le sujet, au point que, au-delà du communiqué, un certain nombre d'idées très opérationnelles ont été envisagées par certains États membres pour veiller à ce que l'on puisse réellement, de manière effective, amener l'aide humanitaire vers les destinataires. Et les principes de corridors humanitaires ou de pauses humanitaires visent bien à rendre cette aide humanitaire effective. Il y a un élément additionnel, c'est que nous sommes aussi très mobilisés sur la question des otages et nous sommes en contact étroit avec les leaders dans la région qui tentent des médiations. Nous pensons que c'est essentiel de continuer inlassablement à appeler à la libération des otages sans condition et sans délai. Et il y a encore un autre élément. Nous sommes très déterminés aussi à travailler en étroite coopération avec nos États membres et les leaders dans la région pour permettre aux citoyens étrangers, dont certains sont des Européens, de quitter Gaza. C'est aussi un autre enjeu. Vous savez qu'il y a de nombreux citoyens qui sont bloqués à Gaza pour le moment. Nous travaillons pour pouvoir permettre qu'ils sortent aussi vite que possible. C'est un premier point, c'est la dimension humanitaire. Mais nous sommes conséquents, je le dis encore, je l'ai dit hier soir avec beaucoup de force après le débat au Conseil européen. Nous sommes très mobilisés, très mobilisés. Nous souhaitons l'être avec toutes les forces de bonne volonté pour engager le processus politique, relancer le processus de paix, le processus de sécurité et pour faire en sorte qu'il y ait bientôt une conférence internationale. C'est un sujet qui a été mis en avant par le Premier ministre Sanchez hier tout au long des débats et pour lequel les 27 chefs d'État et de gouvernement ont décidé de partager cette ambition d'être très mobilisés sur le terrain politique et diplomatique. Vous avez bien compris que nous sommes très déterminés à agir et à agir de manière coordonnée, de manière unie, en lien avec l'ensemble de nos partenaires dans la région.
Thank you. We'll wrap up here. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup. Une priorité. Nous sommes déterminés à continuer à agir sur le plan financier. C'est en lien avec le débat que nous avons eu hier sur la revue de la sécurité intérieure sur le plan européen et l'importance de coopérer davantage dans le domaine policier, dans le domaine judiciaire. Nous avons eu un échange plutôt bref pour ce Conseil européen. C'est un sujet qui revient régulièrement également. Et enfin, on a eu l'occasion aujourd'hui d'aborder plusieurs sujets qui touchent aux affaires de normalisation. Nous avons eu également l'occasion d'un échange sur la situation dans le Conseil. C'était important d'être bien coordonné. On a pu constater une forte unité du Conseil européen sur ce sujet, lié à la mobilisation de moyens dans le cadre européen et à la mobilisation de moyens dans le cadre national, pas le gouvernement national.
The legal migration is important for our country and we will need more of this. That the female participation is way lower than 12 percentage points lower than the male participation in the workforce. All these proposals will be adopted soon so that we can kind of start. And it's of course, as technologies are important, as important are the
having agreements with third countries in order to control migration. The agreement that you have right now with Tunisia